Welcome to the British Museum, one of London's most important landmarks, visited by 7 million people every year. We have over 100 galleries in the museum, and we represent most of the cultures of the whole world. It really is a museum of the world for the world. But we have over 7 million visitors a year now at the British Museum, and they come to look at the ancient civilizations of China, of India, of Rome, Greece and Egypt. But they also come to look at modern living cultures of Africa, Oceania, Australia, and also we try to juxtapose ancient cultures with their living cultures. So for example, we've had wonderful exhibitions of contemporary Middle Eastern calligraphy on display with ancient collection items. We have a core staff of curators who work at the British Museum, whose job is to research the collections and add another dimension to the collections. This isn't just a storehouse of objects. This is effectively a living research centre, rather like a university, where scholars can spend 5 years or more working on a single project in order to illuminate a different part of the collection. I would like to say that the British Museum has the most fantastic conservation section. I mean, really unparalleled throughout the world. We have people who work on paper, on organic material, on stone, metal, ceramics and textiles. And these people are almost a museum within a museum. Objects from the British Museum come primarily from acquisitions, things that we buy, gifts, things that people present to us, or bequests, things that come to us after people's deaths. And this has been the process for over 250 years. It was founded by Sir Hans Sloane, who was the inventor of drinking chocolate. And this right back in 1753, the original museum was based on his collection. But since then, there have been a number of gifts, purchases and bequests that have built the collection. Curators will go out to acquire new things. Obviously today everything has to have been out of the country of origin since 1970, but we acquire many modern objects as well as some ancient objects that have been out of the country of origin since 1970. And we're also given objects by members of the public, both in this country and from abroad. So the collection is growing all the time. Well, I think methods of collecting in the 19th century and 18th century are obviously very, very different from today. And there are objects in the collection which can be the subject of some controversy. But all I can say to that is really that the British Museum is studying these objects and presenting them to as wide a public as possible.
British Museum is fantastic. It's all the objects are very well preserved and very well displayed, and it's a great experience for a tourist, and it gives us a lot of information about various cultures around the world. The Chinese history is very rich, and it tells us a lot about the culture and the religion, the Buddhist religion. Great experience for me, so I'll definitely come back here again. Yeah.
来参观大英博物馆，觉得中国的历史非常的厉害。然后很多东西是在国内无法看到了，然后我们东西在国外展出，在英国展出，也让很多国外的朋友了解到我们的历史文化，觉得这是一个非常好的交流的。然后来参观古代历史，觉得哇，好多东西从来没见过，第一次看到，觉得中国古代的人民智慧好牛啊！
Well, alongside our permanent collections, effectively we breathe new life into our permanent collections through our temporary exhibitions. And our temporary exhibitions rotate amongst the collections. Our last big China exhibition was the Terracotta Warriors of 2008. Now we have our turn for China and the Ming in 2014, and we wanted to narrow in on time and to just look at a 50-year period, just 5 decades of history, and see what new things we could say about that period. We picked the early Ming because it's rather a dramatic moment. You have the founding of the Ming dynasty, of course, in 1368, but effectively a second founding when the Yongle Emperor comes to power in 1403 after the Civil War. And so it begins with the Civil War and ends with the capture of the Zhengtong Emperor in 1449. So you have a sandwiched moment in time. And this moment of time is so special, and that's why we called it Ming 50 Years That Changed China, because it's the moment that the capital moves to Beijing. Before this period, the capital moves around all the time. It's in Luoyang, it's in Hangzhou, it's in Xi'an, it's even briefly been in Beijing before. And from this moment onwards, with a small exception of the early 20th century, Beijing has been the capital ever since. And effectively, that changed China forever, and that's why we chose the title. Another reason why we're focusing in on this period is actually that some of the most beautiful things ever made were produced during the Yongle and Shenda eras. So, for example, you have spectacular blue and white porcelain of a type that was simply not created before or since. There are also wonderful archaeological finds. So we're borrowing from Hubei province some finds which were only discovered in 2001 to 2002. Items such as gold and princes' jewellery and princesses' hairpins and so on. The exhibition itself is about Ming courts and their global connections. This is a time where the capital, as we've mentioned, moves from Nanjing to Beijing, and a series of princely courts are established across China, each of these princes representing the emperor in an area the size of a European country. And we wanted to explain this idea of multiple courts to a wider public. And the second theme is really China's global connections, which has interesting parallels to society today. For most Chinese people, the character of Zheng He is very, very famous. Most people in China, I would say almost everybody in China, has heard of Zheng He. But outside China, very few people have heard of him. And so we wanted to explain the myth and the reality of Zheng He, and talk about China's trade and diplomatic contacts at this time. I mean, China is often thought of as being quite monolithic, but in fact, at this time, it's truly globally connected. Imagine a situation where you had no blue and white being exported from China. How very differently our homes and dining tables would look today. Chinese blue and white is the world's first global product. And everything in our homes is affected by this, from the modern willow pattern plates in England, right through to copies in Japan, to Africa, to South America, all over the world. The whole phenomenon of blue and white was started by China. Within the exhibition, we have 5 sub-themes, one on courts, one on military culture, civil culture, beliefs, and then finally trade and diplomacy. And what makes this exhibition different from other exhibitions is effectively the intellectual content that supports it. This is not an exhibition of masterpieces of the Ming, although that would be a wonderful thing to do. This is really an exhibition in which 5 years of research from a number of the best professors in the world who have come together in order to consider difficult issues about the early 15th century and to present them to the public in as accessible way as possible. We want to make sure that everybody in the world understands what we're trying to do, and at least they will go home with the idea that China was globally engaged in the early 15th century and that there were multiple courts. We're so privileged in this exhibition to be borrowing from 10 major museums in China. The thing that makes the British Museum so special is, in a way, this wonderful freedom to be able to explore a particular topic and to draw together other museums and other scholars from all over the world in order to realise that dream, if you like.